Like it or not, everything is changing. The result will be the most wonderful experience in the history of man, or the most horrible enslavement that you can imagine. Be active or abdicate. The future is in your hands. And that was said by William Cooper. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Max Igan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I'll be your host for the next hour. Yes, folks, be active or abdicate. Some very wise words there from Bill Cooper. May he rest in peace. And being active is something that we all really need to do, folks. We've got to get active. We've got to start making some changes in this world. Because ultimately, folks, it does come down to us. The future is indeed in our hands. And most people can see the writing on the wall. It's just that many people believe that it's addressed to somebody else. But I don't think that, folks. And I attempt to stay active in the struggle and to really keep up the fight and to really hopefully inspire others to do the same. And in the spirit of that attitude, if everything pans out the way it's supposed to and the way it's looking, then there's a very high likelihood that I'll be going to Damascus in Syria at the end of this month, because I've been invited to speak at a peace and reconciliation conference to try to help bring the message about what's really happening in Syria out to the world, because of course we're not getting the correct story. What we are hearing in the West is that there is a revolution in Syria and that the country is rising up to overthrow the brutal dictator Bashar al-Assad. But really what you hear from Syrians on the ground is that there is no revolution, that Bashar al-Assad is actually the good guy and that the people actually support Assad, and that what is happening in Syria is Western-sponsored terrorism designed to destabilize the area and introduce a puppet government. And this is a typical scenario, folks. This is what we see in most countries that the West gets involved in. This is certainly what we just saw in Libya, and it seems to be exactly what's happening in Syria as well. I mean, even Obama has said that the rebel forces are al-Qaeda-backed, but that he believes that the rebel forces actually represent the legitimate voice of the people of Syria, and he has decided to back them anyway, despite their al-Qaeda links. And this is theatre, folks, and it's very easy to see what's going on here, because what will happen is that once the puppet regime is installed, they'll let it go for a little while, and then they'll claim that the new government has ties to al-Qaeda, which of course we already knew when we backed them, and that will give an open excuse for full-scale military intervention into Syria to secure the resources of the country and effectively continue the balkanization of the entire region, which is what the plan is, folks. The whole Syrian conflict and the Libyan conflict, it's all about securing the resources of these countries and also protecting the oil pipelines that now run through the area. It's basically about destabilizing the entire region, folks. They want to destabilize all of the Arab world as much as possible, and that's what they're doing. And of course the rebels in Syria are all backed by the CIA and various other countries that support the CIA and support Israel. Israel, of course, is the main beneficiary of conflict in Syria, and everything Israel does is designed to stir up trouble, really. I mean, look at what they're doing in Palestine, folks. They are failing to conduct any peace talks. They are continuing the expansion of the illegal settlements in the occupied territories despite massive international condemnation. And, of course, these very calculated actions by Israel are very effectively helping Hamas rise to power in both the West Bank and in Gaza. And so Hamas don't even have to do anything to garner support, folks, because Israel is getting them all the support they need, which is, of course, the plan. Because once Hamas is in control of Gaza and the West Bank, then Israel can scream out about how terrible it is that this terrible terrorist organization is now standing against Israel on both sides, and it will give Israel an excuse to escalate the conflict. Because that's what Israel likes to do, folks. It likes to escalate conflicts. Because the truth is that peace could have been achieved in the Middle East years ago, were it not for the actions of Israel. Because the last thing Israel wants is peace. Israel's main export is war and terrorism. It thrives on war and terrorism, and so that's what it creates at every opportunity. You see, the important thing to really remember when looking at the entire global situation, folks, is that nothing is as it seems, and that government never, ever, ever tells you the truth. And neither, it would seem, do the mainstream media. And that, unfortunately, is just the way it is. And so people simply have to pay attention to things for themselves. They have to come up with the correct and rational responses to things themselves. You've really got to step back and look at things on a global stage, folks, and you've really got to look at the bigger picture before swallowing anything the media feeds you. And something that it's important to keep at the forefront of your mind and to understand clearly when looking at all the information that comes from mainstream and government sources is that our world is run by psychopaths. And that is just the painful truth, folks. It's a painful fact, but it is unfortunately very true. And the reason it's getting worse and worse, and the reason psychopaths are becoming so prevalent in our society is because due to the psychopathic rule over our society and the psychopathic rules that have been put in place and the entire psychopathic system that people are forced to grow up in, we are producing more and more psychopaths within society. This is why the laws that are being enforced are becoming more and more ridiculous, and why police are becoming more and more brutal. Because we have created a society which promotes division, which promotes psychopathic behaviour, and they've changed the screening process with police officers so that they are now employing sociopaths and psychopaths. Indeed, folks, if you really step back and critically examine our police and really look at what these guys do these days, look at how they entrap people, look at the way they pretend they're hurt if you even touch them, look at the way they behave, and look at the lengths they go to repress the rights of the people. And if these people can be judged by their actions, then it seems to be very apparent that one actually needs to be a sociopath before even being accepted into the modern police force. And there's been a very, very careful and methodical plan to create these psychopathic personalities within society, folks. It's been done right through the education system. It's been done through the breaking down of the family unit, by breaking down any type of unity, any type of real communication between people. They want to separate people as much as possible, and that's what they've done. And this whole procedure creates psychopathic people. If you look, you'll notice that cultures that are very close to each other and communicate with each other a lot and touch each other and hug each other a lot produce far less psychopathic personalities. And you never find one of these cultures wanting to go to war, for example. That would be the last thing on their mind. Because they're close to each other. They care about people. They have a respect for life that we don't have in the West. We pretend we have. But really, if you look at our societies and look at the way we treat each other within our societies, generally speaking, we don't. We don't have this warmness and love for life that we pretend we have, or that we're told we have. We're always told we have this by our televisions, but you rarely see it within people in Western societies. I mean, look, there are a lot of people who are very loving people, don't get me wrong with this, but generally speaking, when you look at the system, you look at the structure of society, you don't see any of these loving, caring people working within that structure. And if you do, they don't last very long, and they're soon replaced by a sociopath. Whereas in very loving and touching and caring cultures, you don't see this. And like I said, you would never see one of these type of cultures wanting to go to war with another race, simply because of the respect they hold for life. And it's all life that they respect, folks, not just human life or animal life, but all life, the life of the forest, the life of everything. And generally speaking, you do not see this in Western culture. What you see in Western culture is a loss of connection to all that, a loss of a real connection to life, a loss of any real connection to spirit. That's what you see in Western culture. Folks, you see a very, very different understanding of reality in cultures that are close and cultures that respect each other. And you'll see that all of these cultures are essentially non-violent. They might have a little bit of a tiff now and then, but no real violence. I mean, they'd never make weapons of mass destruction or put people in a cage simply because they stepped over the line or had some plant in their pocket. In cultures where people are very close and communicate with each other and respect each other, you just wouldn't see any of this stuff. But when you separate people and force them into positions where they don't have contact with each other and where it becomes a crime to simply touch another child in the playground during a game of tag, then you produce people that are more prone to sociopathic behaviour. And when you look at the amount of steps that have been put in place and have been taken by governments to actually work to separate people, then it becomes very, very clear that this is a plan. This is a well thought out and very, very well orchestrated plan to produce sociopathic people so that we remain in a divided society, so that we can never stand up against government and we can never change the direction the world is going in. Because we're only going to be able to do that through unity. You're only going to be able to change the society you're in if the society respects each other and people are close to each other. People live their lives in Lakesh. That's how you change a society, and that's how you change a government. But everything about this system that the government has put in place, everything about our education, everything about our whole social structure is designed to do exactly the opposite, and it's designed to elevate sociopathic and psychopathic people into positions of control so that they can impose their morality over the people whom they govern. And this is true of any government, any business, any corporation, any commerce-based system that is in place on this planet. There's very, very few of them that actually work to help the people. It's all about the bottom line. It's all about profits, especially if these organisations incorporate. Because when you incorporate, you are forced by law to put profits above all else. I mean, a corporation is a psychopathic entity in its very design. And that's one of the big problems, folks, is that our world is corporate run. We live in a corporate world. We live in a world where we have corporate governments, we have corporate councils, we have corporations operating within these bodies, we have everything. It's all incorporated. People soon learn that if they're going to go into business, the way to free themselves from any responsibility for whatever that business may do is to incorporate the business. And so the very form of a corporation itself is prone to attract sociopathic people who do not want to be held responsible for their actions. And that's what a corporation is, folks. It provides a mechanism for sociopaths and psychopaths to act out their repressed biological urges against the rest of the world, completely free of any responsibility for any damage they may cause to the world in doing so. So really, folks, when you step back and you look at things and you see how all this has been constructed and why things have gotten so bad because of the amount of psychopaths and sociopaths that exist within society these days, you begin to see that all is not lost, and it isn't that there are lots and lots of powerful and bad people. It's just that there are bad people that are in key positions. But it's not really that big of an obstacle to overcome the whole thing, because ultimately, I mean, it's all fiction anyway. It's just a system that exists on paper. It's just an idea of how the world should be that we all go along with. And the people who are in control of it really do not number many. It's just that these people are, as I said, placed into key positions. And really, folks, becoming aware of all this and understanding that it is just a fictional system, it's a psychopathic system and it's run by very few people at the top, this is key to realizing how to address the problem, because it becomes apparent that really all we have to do is spread information. That's how we deal with it, folks. And there's lots of ways you can do this, even just with flyers and pamphlets, as I've often said. You can give DVDs out to people. There's actually a new Woody Harrelson film. I think it's called Ethos. It's narrated by Woody Harrelson. And this is a great film for waking up someone who is completely asleep. I mean, there's so much more to it than what it says in the film, but for people who are completely locked into the matrix, well, here's a Hollywood actor that they may like or respect, and maybe they'll listen to what he has to say. And that could be a very effective tool for just cracking that shell with people. But you've got to feel free and empowered enough to want to do this. And that's really what the basis of the whole thing is, folks, is how free you feel that you are to speak out and to do what needs to be done, because the matter does need to be addressed, folks. I mean, it's really not an issue that can be put up for debate or negotiation or anything like that. The world is run by psychopaths, and we are heading headlong towards our own extinction if we don't rein the ship of state in and change the direction that we're going in. And look, it's not going to be done through petitioning our leaders. It's not going to be done by building alternate communities. We've got to stand as one people on this planet, regardless of what borders you believe exist there on some map that somebody wrote. Realize that all the people are just your brothers and sisters. Doesn't matter what their race, colour or creed. We are all brothers and sisters on this planet, and we need to stand for that and stand up in that and as that, because we have to rein things in. We simply cannot allow the wanton destruction of our planet to continue. We cannot allow the corporate slavery system to continue raping the planet and raping the wealth from the people. We have to stand up and make a difference. And it's got to be done now, and it's got to be done soon, because many of the new generation that's coming through, a lot of the kids these days, folks, they're kept in such a severe state of shortage, and they're kept locked into a virtual reality. They're always texting or playing video games or some other completely irrelevant and unnatural activity. Nobody's paying attention. And if we allow the younger generation that is coming through this virtual computer world that we now live in to come to prominence while maintaining their current level of consciousness, then Earth will be lost. It really will. It's got to be done now. It's got to be done by this generation. Because unfortunately there's just not enough of the younger generation picking up the flag. There's just not enough kids becoming aware of the global situation and speaking out. And it's the last few generations that have let it happen. But they didn't really know what was going on. It's this generation now that knows what's going on and that has the tools to be able to address the problem and fix the problem and change the direction the ship of state is sailing in. You know, we have to do it, folks. We have to pick up the torch and we have to change the direction the world is going. It's up to us. There's nobody coming to save you. There's no Christ figure coming to save you. The ETs aren't coming to save you. It's up to us. The people of this planet, we have to pay attention to what's going on. We have to realize that all of the schism and all of the problems that have been created on this planet are our problems, and only we can deal with them, because it is only we who have allowed them to happen. We've allowed them to happen because we got distracted. We allowed ourselves to become enslaved to a psychopathic system because we failed to see our own worth. And this system is doing everything it can to prevent people from ever discovering the truth. And look, there are so many means that are put in place to do this, folks. There are so many mechanisms that are used. And one of the main ones is food, folks. Have you seen how the food has changed? Have you noticed how the food has changed in the last few decades? Even the sweets and lollies that the kids eat, folks. Remember, these things used to be full of sugar. You'd drop one on the ground and within a minute it would be covered in ants and insects, eager to eat the sugar in the lolly. But now you drop a lolly or a sweet on the ground and the insects won't go near it because the ingredients have changed. The sweet still tastes much the same as what they did when we were children, although they don't really. I mean, there has been a visible decline in the quality of all the food that we've consumed, sweets or otherwise, in the last few decades. But modern food, folks, modern bread, modern anything from a packet that you drop on the ground, it's very rare that the ants will cover the food and rush to consume it the way they used to. In fact, none of nature seems very interested in eating anything that comes from a packet anymore. And yet people within society consume all of these prepackaged foods all the time, never noticing that nothing else will eat them, unless they're absolutely forced to. And people have become addicted to this prepackaged and artificially sweetened food. Very noticeable test that they did, folks. They got prepackaged, very, very low-grade, artificially enhanced food, and they fed it to rats. Essentially, they were feeding them the sort of food that your average household consumes. And then they stopped feeding them this food and put real food back in front of them, and the rats had become so addicted to the prepackaged, artificially sweetened food that they actually preferred to starve themselves to death rather than eat real, nutritious food. And so this is the effect that this food is having upon our society, and most especially upon the younger generation. You see, it's affecting them both biologically and psychologically. And this is a very, very dangerous state to be in, and it's imperative that we start turning things around. And as I've often said, there has been a certain sequence that has been used to bring us to this point. And what we have to do is crack the code and reverse the sequence. And that's what I believe a lot of the truth community has been doing. That's what I believe a lot of the research that's been coming to the fore has been doing. You see, it's taken them over 2,000 years to get us here, folks, and there's so many steps that they've gone through to bring us to this point. You can't just go from A to Z in 2,000 years and then suddenly realize that things are all messed up and jump from Z back to A, because society will suffer if you do so. Many, many people will suffer. So you have to find a way of reversing the sequence to bring people full circle back to where they should be. And this is, of course, what I'm trying to do with the Full Circle project that I hope to get started later this year. We've got to find a way of reversing this sequence, folks. Because we can still save the world, folks. We can still reverse the sequence. We can still find a way out of this mess. But it's going to take global participation of people, regardless of what governments say. We don't care about the governments, folks. We want grassroots action by the people. And that's what we have to implement. And there's plenty of ways that we can do it within the parameters that have been put in place for us. There's lots of mechanisms that people are coming up with, real solution-based ideas. And we can take the gems and we can put them all together and we can come up with something very, very powerful if we put our heads together. But we have to stop fighting and we have to start putting a plan into action right now. And I know, folks, that's a lot easier said than done, because it's very hard to unite people to a common cause when people simply refuse to be united to a common cause. God knows there have been many attempts to do so in the last few years, but any time people see something which may bring down the old world order, they claim it's the new world order, and the government shells come out, and the so-called truthers who have a vested interest in maintaining the fight also come out, and any movement to unite the people gets quickly squashed. That's what we saw recently with the OPPT as well. And an interesting thing about the OPPT is that it is now dissolved, folks. And so that is a wonderful piece of news, because it has now dissolved itself while leaving the filings that it made standing there within the UCC system for people to use should they choose to be free. Hopefully the fact that the trust has now dissolved, as it had to do in order for the filings to be legitimate, hopefully now those people, the so-called truthers who were so spuriously speaking out against it and claiming it to be a New World Order mechanism, will now eat their words, because now it becomes apparent that it was never any type of control system. It was simply a mechanism that was being used by a group of people who are attempting to point out to the people of the world that they are actually free, should they choose to be so. And incidentally, folks, I know at least 3 people personally who have lodged the courtesy notices given to them by the One People's Public Trust, and they have had great success in doing so. So as I said, folks, the mechanisms for we to each establish our freedom individually are there should we choose to use them. Because that's what freedom is, folks. It's an individual choice. It's personal responsibility. No one's going to save you. No one has any plan that you can buy into that is going to save you. We have to save ourselves. But we have to be prepared to do so, and before we can do that, we must first, of course, fully realize who and what we actually are. And really, though it is the most basic of all human functions, it really does seem to be the part that most people seem to have most difficulty with. Not to blame them, of course, because that is the way people have been trained to be. That's what this society has produced, and it's been a very well thought out and very meticulously implemented plan right from the very beginning. It really has, folks. But again, as I've said on recent shows, you don't need to have a major amount of people to do it. You just need to have people that are in control of key positions. And this is done through the mechanism of the corporate system, because the corporate system is all based in commerce. So once you control the commerce and you control the money, then you can control everything beneath it. And that's the way it's been done. You know, the introduction of money over any society only has the effect of placing those within that society into a state of artificial scarcity. That's its purpose. And when you have an interest-based, a usurious-based monetary system, such as the one we currently have, then it has the effect of dispossessing the people of their natural wealth, dispossessing the people of their natural state of abundance, and essentially dispossessing them from the earth, which is their gift of life. The planet gives them their life, and the economic system very cleverly taketh that life away. And I don't know about you folks, but I'm getting pretty well sick to death of it. I've really had enough of lying politicians. I've really had enough of this dysfunctional society, and nothing would please me more than to see the people of the world wake up to their own power and stand up to make some positive change. Because we could do so with very little effort, folks. All it would take is unity. That really is all it would take. People think that the hurdles are insurmountable, but they're not. It all starts with unity, and that unity only comes from finding yourself and respecting yourself. And I've said it so many times on this show, I know I'm just beating the same drum. But that's really where it comes from, folks. We've got to respect ourselves and respect the world that we live in, and simply stand up and say, hey, this is the direction that we're going in now. We can give the governments the option to come with us if we want, but we have to understand that they don't control us. We control them. Nobody controls us, folks. We were created by the Creator to be all that we can be. And the main function of this society seems to be to prevent that from happening at all costs. And it's about time we wake up to ourselves and realise that it's all just fiction, and we can change things any time we want. But I think it's break time here, folks, so I'll leave it there for now, and we can go and have a break. Thank you for spending this time with me today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'll speak to you again in a few minutes. Thanks for listening. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I believe that at this particular time in history, we are being presented with a unique opportunity for change. And I think we've had some reasonably good opportunities earlier in the piece, but we've never really had an opportunity as good as the one that we're being offered right now. And I think that if we fail to embrace this opportunity, we're not going to get another one. You know, if we don't do something now and change the direction the ship of state is sailing in, once it gets a little bit further, we're not going to really have any opportunity to do so. Because if this system continues in the direction that it's going and society does end up getting locked down, once the door has swung shut, it will be very, very difficult to find the key. The amount of information that's been lost, the amount of distraction our kids are subject to, the way very, very few of the younger generation show any real interest in reality at all, is a very, very disturbing trend. And so that's why, really, when you look at it, you see that mankind at this very time sits on a knife edge. We really could go either way. And unfortunately, I don't think many people really see the urgency of the situation. I think many people are caught up in their own ideas. They're caught up in their own little way out that they've constructed, their own little escape mechanism that they've created. And they want people to come along and join them and follow them on their path, but they're not really prepared to stand with anybody else's path. They're not really prepared to allow people to follow their own path, but for us all to do that together. Because ultimately, folks, in order to follow your own path, you've got to live in a world whereby people around you are also free to follow their path. And their path may not be the same as yours, but it has just as much value and just as much integrity. And we need to respect this. You know, there is no one way out of this problem. Ultimately, there are 7 billion ways out of the problem because there are 7 billion people on the planet, and each one of them must find their own way through, because ultimately the path that each of them must discover is the path to themselves, the path to their own heart. And that's why there can be no leaders in this battle, and there can be no new type of systems or hierarchy that can be established to deal with the problem. I mean, there can be way showers, but no real leaders, folks, because each person has to lead themselves, because ultimately what they are looking for is their self. You know, that's what freedom is, folks. It's self-responsibility. 100% self-responsibility, 100% liability for your actions. Being all that you could be, but allowing others to do the same. And I believe that at this time in history, we have a unique opportunity to actually do this. You know, the energies are changing. Everything is changing. Everything started changing a few years ago, a few decades ago. And the change has become really noticeable and really prominent in the last few years, because people are waking up to the fact that what we are experiencing here is essentially a meme. This whole system is a meme. It's just an idea. It's just a concept. And there are far better ways of doing things. You know, I've often said, folks, that nothing is impossible. The only thing that is impossible is that which you believe to be impossible. We can literally create anything we want. We can create any society we want. And we can also create any slavery system that those who want to enslave us want us to create, if we allow these people to manipulate our belief of what is real, and our belief of what the world is really like, and our belief of what society is really like. If we allow people to convince us that they are all powerful and that there is no way out of our predicament, then that is the reality that we create. And we have to wake up to ourselves. And most especially the truth movement. I believe the truth movement, the alternate media, has a responsibility to people. You know, people out there, you have a responsibility to be honest in what you say to people, and you have a responsibility to help people become empowered. There's far too much disempowerment in the movement. There's far too much division in the movement. There's far too many people trying to sell their own ideas. And there's far too little unity. And if any idea comes to prominence, people just jump on it and squash it down because it wasn't theirs. Now, that's what I'm seeing, and really it's very precocious behaviour. It's very irresponsible behaviour. And it's very unnecessary behaviour, because this isn't a game, folks. It isn't a game. It isn't a popularity contest. We're facing some very, very difficult situations in the planet. We're facing a very, very uncertain future at the moment. And the only way we can fix it is by participating in the world around us, participating in ourselves. You see, that's the thing, folks. Most people don't participate in themselves because they don't know what they are. They think they are something else. They think they are whatever they perceive themselves to be in the virtual world that they live in. They think that they are what their life brings them, or they are what they own, or they are what they look like. And they don't ever discover their true self, the true beauty of themselves, the power that they have, the fact that they are created with equal standing, the same as everybody else. And that's where the problem lies, because they never find their own power. But I believe that we are currently in an extremely important time in history. I believe that consciousness and the planet and reality itself are all in a state of transition. And I think that a lot of the outcome of what this transition will be depends on the way we participate and the effort we are prepared to put into bringing about some positive change. And I believe that reality and consciousness and this beautiful planet all have faith in us, that we can do it, that we can discover ourselves, we can discover our true power, we can stand up for what is right, we can change the direction everything's going in. And I've been saying for years, folks, that all it would take is the participation of the people. We could change the world in 3 seconds if we all just changed our perspective. If we're not prepared to do that, well, if we just stood in unity, we could change it in 1 day. Non-compliance, folks, you imagine what 1 day of global non-compliance would do. Imagine if everybody stayed home and did nothing for 1 day. The whole system would come to a standstill, and people would realize the power that they've got. But people just don't seem to be willing to participate. They argue, they point the finger, and they expect someone else to fix it. They don't realise that their non-participation, their choice of neutrality is participating. Because in a state of moral dilemma that we are currently in, and it is a moral dilemma, it's a physical dilemma, it's a dilemma, folks. And in such a state of moral dilemma, remaining neutral is not a decision. Remaining neutral in the face of a tyrannical system means you are siding with the side of the tyrant. That's it. If you don't resist tyranny, then you are siding with the side of the tyrant. You are helping bring about a system of tyranny simply by your non-participation in the reality in which you live. So your non-participation is in fact a choice to allow the world to continue heading towards its own destruction. I mean, that's the truth of the matter, folks, and I don't know what it will take to wake people up, and sometimes it's enormously frustrating to see how irresponsible the alternate media is in not really respecting each other and creating a global united movement, because we have the numbers to do that. The only problem is that we have so many egos within the movement that the movement itself has become its own worst enemy and become so disorganized and disparate that it's almost become counterproductive. And when I see the opportunities that we're being presented with at this time in history and our failure to grasp these opportunities and the willingness of so many people to promote a state of division, it just becomes incredibly disheartening, folks. Sometimes it makes me want to just give up. Sometimes I wonder why I do the shows. Sometimes I think I should just go to South America and build a little tumble in the forest and have done with it. But then I think perhaps it's just a test. Perhaps I'm being given further opportunities to find myself. Perhaps it's always darkest before the dawn, and perhaps humanity is finally going to realize what they're capable of, and they're going to stand up and do something about this global situation, rather than just pointing the finger and arguing about it and creating division the way so many people do these days. But I really do believe it's got to be done by our generation, folks. I think we can't just pass the torch on to our kids, because I don't think our kids are going to be interested in it. Our kids are growing up in a very, very different world to the world that we grew up in. And if we don't get our hands back on the tiller and start changing the direction the ship of state is sailing in, then all will indeed be lost. And as I said, I think the planet and I think consciousness depends on us doing so. I think we've got to get out of this salvationist mentality. We've got to stop believing that it all just has to get worse and we have to let it get worse because it says so in this religious book, and eventually a saviour is going to come and save us all. Because I think that's a script, folks. I think that's a script that's been put there simply to lock people into inaction. And it's done so very, very effectively. And I think it's about time we woke up to it and paid attention and started taking the matter in hand ourselves, because I really do believe, folks, that's the only hope we've got. That's the only hope humanity has. That's the only hope this planet has. That's the only hope all the life on this planet that depends on us waking up and acting also has, folks. It all depends on us. It all depends on what we decide to do at the time that's given to us. And I think we have to make that decision now. We have to see the writing on the wall. We have to see the future that is coming to us, and we have to change the direction we're going in. And it has to be done now. We've got to find a way of unifying the people, and we've got to find a way of uniting the alternate research community. There's so many people in there that if you even question anything they say, if you question anything they do, they accuse you of working for the government. It's absolutely amazing, folks. There's so many paranoid and delusional and spellbound people in this movement that it just boggles the mind. And that's something that we seriously need to address. And I really believe that the way through, folks, is to lead yourself, to lead by example in what you do, to always act in integrity, and to always question authority, and to lead by example in your community, but you've got to respect your community. That's the thing. You've got to respect the people around you, and this will ultimately come through you respecting yourself. It always comes down to the inner work, folks. It always comes down to the individual changing their perspective and applying it to the world around them. And I know I've beat this same drum on the show for 5 years now, folks, but things are getting desperate. The world is changing very, very rapidly. We are seeing so many people dispossessed in so many countries. We are seeing the police get more and more brutal, and the government's becoming more and more irresponsible. It's like they're in a feeding frenzy. They just keep creating more and more rules and more jails and more fines and making the cost of living rise ever upwards. And they are dispossessing more and more people as they do so. And as I said, the children that we're raising in this society simply are not going to have the intellectual mechanism and psychological makeup needed to bring about any change if we don't pay attention now. At least people who have kids, try to talk to your kids, try to get them out of their habit of texting, try to get them out of the virtual worlds that they're living in, and see if you can't get them to pay attention to society a little bit, and see if you can't get them to pay attention to life. See, that's something that we've also instilled into the children, folks, is a disregard for life, a disregard for the wisdom of their elders. Kids don't respect their elders at all anymore. They don't respect the elder ones in their society. They don't respect that people may have gained wisdom in their lives that they can hand on to them. They're only interested in the latest fashion or the latest iPod app or the latest video game. They think that's what's cool. They've been taught that it's not cool to be old. It's not cool to listen to what elder people have to say. What's important is being young and beautiful. That's what it's all about. It's the exaltation of youth. I've done whole shows on the exaltation of youth. And this is largely what has been used to turn children away from the path of wisdom and turn people away from the family unit. And we need to try to get some of that back, folks. We've got to start building these bridges with our kids, because if we don't do it, then they're not going to have a future, folks. And we are the custodians of that future. While there's still breath in our body, we are custodians of the future. We are the custodians of life and liberty and freedom on this planet. And we need to pay attention and be good custodians, or the future that we are allowing to be created for our kids will simply be a future that is not worth living in. I don't know about you folks, but I'll be able to look in the eyes of my grandkids and I'll be able to say, look, I tried everything I could possibly do to ensure that you had a good future. And if the future is not all roses at that time, well, at least I know that I tried. That's why I don't give up, folks. Sometimes I do get frustrated. Sometimes I think, what's the point? And I think that I just want to go and live in the forest. Sometimes it's very, very disheartening when members of the truth community attack you because you question their actions. It becomes very disheartening when people that have listened to the shows for a long time suddenly turn fickle and start attacking you because they were so misinformed about the actions of the OPPT, and they were so delusional and paranoid and so willing to believe that I would do something to bring about the New World Order after everything I've said on the shows. These sort of people are the falsest and fakest types of individuals that the world has. These are the type of people who turn the other cheek and change sides at the drop of a hat, and people who see this whole alternate research community as a popularity contest. It makes me wonder why I bother, and the only real beneficial thing about it is that it makes me realize what an uphill battle we actually have and what we are up against, because people are so willing to indulge themselves in hatred of others. Even people that they've trusted for so long, you say one word out of place and they turn fickle and they start making up lies about you. It's absolutely incredible, folks. That's the type of world we live in. And as I've said, this is because people are trained to act in a sociopathic manner. And all you have to do is say one word out of place, folks, and they will attack you in the most hateful and hurtful way that they can. Because as soon as they turn, as soon as they start feeling those thoughts about people, they get disconnected from source, and so they have to harvest energy from others. And that's what we see. And in fact, the more testing this society gets, the more animosity we see within the alternate research community, the more we see people attempting to harvest energy from others. It's actually very, very telling, and it's very indicative of the sort of difficulties we're actually facing. And it's all very well to be confident that we can build a good future and confident that we can come out of the problems that we are in and confident that we can deal with this situation, but it's not good to allow that confidence to become complacency. You always have to act, folks. You've always got to participate. You can never let your guard down, and you've got to remember that those who are working against mankind and attempting to introduce this slavery system, they don't take rests. They work right around the clock, and they plan years and years ahead. And so it's important that we pay attention, and it's important that we don't ever stop in our resistance to what is being rolled out and rolled over the top of us. And it is, folks. It's being rolled right over the top of us. And the only people who can stop the progress of the machine that is our world today are the people themselves. See, it's got to be done by individuals, folks. There is no movement. You have to do it yourself. You have to stand up and you have to stand against this system in every way that you can. Non-compliance, folks. Question every single thing this system asks you to do. Question it all. Question the authority of every single person who claims to have authority over you. Because you've got to understand that the rulers of this planet are psychopaths. And we don't have to do what they say. And we certainly cannot sit idly by and allow our world to be destroyed around us because we are compliant to rules written on pieces of paper by psychopathic personalities who do not have anybody's best interests at heart. It's just wanton destruction, folks. That's all that we get from our governments is wanton destruction and a loss of freedom, a loss of rights, and an ever-encroaching police state. That's all we get from our governments, folks. And the only way we can turn it around is by discovering our own power and deciding to stand in it. It's a choice, folks, and everybody has to make the choice, and now is the time the choice has to be made. You know, if you start standing up against the system, questioning every single bill you get, every single person who claims authority over you, if you start questioning their actions and you encourage your neighbours to do the same and your whole community starts questioning their actions, then it all breaks down. It's like what they did with the poll tax in England, folks. They introduced a poll tax years ago and everybody refused to pay it, and so they had to cancel the poll tax. It's that simple. Non-compliance, folks, that's how we fix the problem. But it's got to be a united act of non-compliance that can only come from the people of society respecting each other. And that's what we're missing. That's what we've been trained to move away from more than anything. That's why the youth has been exalted so much, folks. The exaltation of youth. Once you get to 30, you're over the hill. But they never tell the youth that that time comes very quickly and you don't actually grow up until you hit 30. You may think that you did, but once you get to around about 30 or 40 years old, you realize that you weren't grown up at all when you were a kid. You thought you were 25 years old and you thought you knew everything, but it's really not the way the world works. And that's why they exalt the youths so much, so that once they reach 30 or so and they haven't lived up to all these standards society set themselves, they lapse into depression, they believe that they're over the hill and things just can't work anymore, they've lost their youth. And anybody younger than them who can make a difference has been trained to perceive them as being over the hill. So it's a mind game, folks. It's a program. People are simply programmed to act in certain ways and to think in certain ways, and they're programmed to allow society to continue its downward spiral. And that's what they do. But it's a program, folks. It's a program, and it could be quite easy to break out of if the elder generation on the planet actually paid attention and applied themselves to the world as well. See, it's on all levels, folks. It's not just the youth. It's most of the elder people as well. People just won't apply themselves. They think that it's all too big and it's all too insurmountable and there's nothing that one little person can do. But ultimately, every change that's ever been brought about in the world in history, folks, has all been brought about ultimately because of the actions of one person. Every revolution, every discovery, every great moment in our history has happened ultimately because one person had an idea and decided to act on it. So don't ever talk yourself into disbelieving the power of one, because the power of one determined individual can be a world-changing force. And history has proven this time and time again. It just ultimately comes down to the individual, folks. It just comes down to what people are prepared to do. Are you prepared to stand up and be counted? Are you prepared to speak out? I mean, just in the simple act of lifting your voice and speaking out so that you can be heard can make an enormous difference, folks. Everybody in the truth movement, myself included, everybody who you listen to, everybody who is speaking out, are simply single individuals sitting in their homes that have decided that it is necessary to speak out, and who believe that by speaking out they can make a difference. And they've chosen to do so. They've chosen to have their voices heard. And everybody can do the same. Anybody who feels in their heart that the world could be a better place and believes in themselves can speak out and can make a difference. Speak out at your local council meetings. You can go to all sorts of public gatherings and you can make your voice heard. And if you are a respectful person, people will listen. That's the thing. You've just got to be respectful, folks, because most people know that we have a problem. They're just not quite sure what it is. But they know that everything is not right. People realize that they're struggling more and more, and the more they struggle, the more they will realize. And perhaps that's what it's going to take, folks. Perhaps it does have to get worse yet. Perhaps that's why I get so frustrated when I see people who aren't standing up and who aren't speaking out, and I see people in apathy. I get frustrated because I know what's coming, and I know how much these people are going to suffer if they don't speak out now. But perhaps that's what it's going to take. Perhaps it's not going to be until the last second, until people's backs are completely against the wall, that they realize the need to stand up and be counted. I hope it doesn't come to that, but perhaps that's just what it's going to take. And if it does come to that, well, all I can say is remain true to your hearts, folks. Believe in yourself and know that you can bring about positive change and never, ever take a backward step to this system. I think it's about end of the show time here, folks. I was going to have a friend of mine on the show this week to discuss his Candida programs and his sugar-free diets and paleo diets that he's introducing with people. He's had an incredible amount of success with curing all sorts of diseases, but due to electricity problems this week, it just didn't work out. So I have a pre-recorded interview that I'm going to be playing on the show next week. Very interesting individual, folks, and I'm looking forward to playing you that one. It'll be interesting to see what the reaction from people is to some of the stuff that he's presenting. But we are out of time, folks, so I'm going to have to end the show here. Thank you to everybody who listens to the show regularly. Thank you to everybody who visits the Crow House. Thank you to everybody who's ever made a donation to the Crow House. It's very, very appreciated. I'm sorry I don't get a chance to answer everybody's emails and to mail everybody, but I do love you all, and I do appreciate all the information you send me. And if it wasn't for your support, I most certainly would not still be doing what I do. So thank you very much, and please accept my heartfelt love and gratitude. But that is it for me, folks. I have to go now. I'm completely out of time. I'll look forward to speaking to you again next week. Please take care until then. In Lakesh.